Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Pakistan has condemned the extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris in fake encounters and restrictions on Muharram processions in occupied Kashmir. Addressing a peace march in southern Punjab, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's policies have failed in the occupied territory. He urged the United Nations Security Council President to write to UN Secretary General informing him about the plight of Kashmiris under Indian occupation. Touching upon other issues, Qureshi said Pakistan enjoys fertile ties with Saudi Arabia. Turkey's Vice President Fuat Oktay has slammed a recent threat by the EU to impose sanctions on Ankara as hypocritical. In a tweet, Oktay said, on one hand, the bloc calls for dialogue, but on the other hand, it keeps a check on Ankara's activities. This comes after EU's top diplomat Joseph Borrell hinted at imposing curbs on Turkey over its drilling in the eastern Mediterranean. Mali's military rulers have postponed their first meeting over the transfer of powers, citing organizational reasons. This comes a day after West African leaders demanded an immediate civilian transition and elections within 12 months. A political crisis has gripped the country since the ousting of former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta on the 18th of August. India has registered the world's highest COVID-19 cases, with more than 76,000 people testing positive in the past 24 hours, taking the tally to over 3.4 million. India's death toll has exceeded 62,000, with over 1,000 fatalities since yesterday. Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded one death, the lowest since the start of the outbreak in the country. The death toll from coronavirus worldwide has exceeded 837,000 as the number of infections surpasses 24.7 million. News in detail coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now we'll have the news in detail. We'll begin from Pakistan, which has condemned the extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris in fake encounters and restrictions on Muharram processions in occupied Kashmir. Addressing a peace march in southern Punjab, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's policies have failed in the occupied territory. Islamabad has repeatedly urged the international community to hold India accountable for its crimes against Kashmiri people. More in this report. Indian authorities have imposed restrictions across the territory to prevent Muharram processions. Srinagar bore a curfew-like look as shops were shut and heavy security was deployed in the key areas. The condemnation by Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi comes as police arrested several mourners trying to take out a procession. He urged the UNSC President to write to UN Secretary General informing him about the plight of Kashmiris under Indian occupation. Tensions in the occupied region increased after India revoked its special status last year in August. Indian troops have killed hundreds of Kashmiris, including 7 in the last 24 hours since then. The EU has warned Turkey it could face sanctions unless it takes steps to defuse an escalating dispute with Greece in the Mediterranean. Tensions between the neighbours have spiraled in recent weeks after Ankara hinted at drilling for oil and gas in the contested waters. More in this report.
Turkey says its drilling activities fall within its own exclusive economic zone. Ankara's foreign ministry said the bloc had no authority to demand it stop illegitimate search for resources. Escalating tensions between two NATO members have made things difficult for the EU. Nonetheless, EU's top diplomat Joseph Borrell said the bloc wanted to give a serious chance to dialogue.
That there is a growing frustration in the face of Turkey's behavior. On that, the Council expressed a political consensus to ask the relevant Council working groups to speed up their work.
The countries in the bloc have waited their full support for Greece while committing to diffusing tensions, while France's President Emmanuel Macron has taken a tough stance with regards to Turkey's actions in the water. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has pushed for a dialogue. Merkel said Berlin is committed to preventing an escalation of the dispute.
I believe that all of us as member states of the European Union must of course take Greece's rights and concerns very seriously and support them when they are in the right. Nevertheless, I have always argued for the situation not to escalate further, and to an extent that is only possible if we keep talking to both sides. The disputes there over the distribution of the economic zones can only be resolved together. Germany is making efforts in this regard.
Reacting, Turkey slammed EU's threat of sanctions, calling it hypocritical. Vice President Fuat Oktay said, on one hand, the bloc calls for dialogue, but on the other hand, it keeps a check on Ankara's activities. Despite the increasing tensions, Turkey has maintained it will continue to protect its rights and interests.
Now, the president of UAE has issued a decree cancelling a law on boycotting Israel. It also allows trade and financial agreements between the two countries. State media said the decree from President Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan aims at strengthening and supporting bilateral relations. The previous federal law of 1972 banned the recognition of Israel and imposed penalties for those found in breach of law. This comes as Israel's EIAI airline is set to operate first direct flight between Tel Aviv and Abu Dhabi on the 31st of August. The flight will be carrying an Israeli delegation and top aides to U.S. President Donald Trump, including senior advisor Jared Kushner. Meanwhile, Mali's military rulers have postponed their first meeting over the transfer of powers, citing organizational reasons. This comes as a day after West African leaders demanded an immediate civilian transition and elections within 12 months. In exchange, the 15-nation bloc has committed to gradually lifting sanctions. The group has shut borders with Mali following last week's ousting of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Meanwhile, Japan has reaffirmed its support for the U.S. stance in the East and the South China Sea. Defense Minister Taro Kono says Tokyo will oppose any attempt to change the status quo in the region. Kono said U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has confirmed the disputed Senkaku Islands are covered by the bilateral security agreement. Tokyo's remarks come amid rising escalations between the U.S. and China. Washington says Beijing's aggression disrupts regional peace and violates the 2002 declaration on the conduct of parties in the South China Sea. Beijing controls the majority of islands in the territory, but Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, among other nations, also have a claim. India has registered the world's highest COVID-19 cases, with more than 76,000 people testing positive in the past 24 hours. The Indian Health Ministry has reported over 1,000 fatalities since yesterday. Globally, the coronavirus death count has exceeded 837,000 as the number of infections surpasses 24.7 million. More details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to wreak havoc across the globe as several regions face a re-emergence of the deadly disease. The virus has shifted its focus to India, where the country is reporting 62,550 deaths total, with more than 3.4 million cases so far. In the US, a majority of the states have rejected the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's new guidance on COVID-19 testing. Canada will extend measures barring most foreign travelers from entering the country amid efforts to contain the virus. Peru, reporting one of the deadliest outbreaks in the region, is set to test vaccines in September in an effort to secure faster access when they are approved.
At this moment, it is already confirmed that Sinopharm China will do tests here in the country. They will start on September 8th and there will be 6,000 volunteers. Johnson & Johnson has confirmed that it will start the test on September 24th with 4,000 volunteers. We are contacting other laboratories from Great Britain and other countries, which would allow us to immunize 70% of the population.
In Europe, France has reported its highest post-lockdown daily cases since March, with more than 7,300 infections being recorded overnight. Hungary has announced to close its borders to foreigners from September 1st to curb the rise of coronavirus infections. Meanwhile, Australia's most populous state of Victoria has recorded its lowest number of infections in 8 weeks.
We have 18,903 confirmed aggregate cases of coronavirus in Victoria. That's 94 more cases since yesterday's update. There have, I'm sad to report, now been 513 Victorians who have lost their life due to this global pandemic.
Mainland China has reported only 9 imported cases as the country logged no domestic transmissions. South Korea has reported 323 new COVID-19 cases over the past 24 hours as officials urge citizens to abide by social distancing measures.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the COVID-19 daily deaths have reached an all-time low with 1 fatality in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 319 more people tested positive for the virus overnight, taking the tally to over 295,000. The countrywide death toll stands at 6,284. The ministry said the recovery rate from the disease is over 94%. It said more than 280,000 people have recovered from the disease, while 642 patients are in critical condition. The ministry said the number of active cases is below 9,000. Sindh remains the worst-hit province, witnessing nearly 129,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 96,000 cases so far. Moving on, China says Beijing and Oslo must cherish healthy and stable development of bilateral ties in recent years. In a news briefing, Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China and Norway are far away from each other but can maintain sustained growth. He said the two countries pursue mutually beneficial cooperation in the post-pandemic era. Yi called on both sides to speed up trade negotiations and reach an agreement as soon as possible. Norway is the third country after Italy and the Netherlands in Yi's foreign tour following an ease in the pandemic. Now moving to Libya, where protests have broken out a day after the head of the country's UN-backed government suspended Interior Minister Fathi Bashagha. Dozens of Libyans gathered in the streets of Misrata against the decision, voicing concerns over corruption in the country. Yesterday, the government said Bashagha's handling of a crackdown on protesters will be investigated within 72 hours. It added that Bashagha's duties would be assumed by Deputy Minister Khalid Ahmed. Nominated in 2018, Bashagha played a central role during a 14-month offensive on Tripoli by eastern forces of Khalifa Haftar. Now, Belarus has threatened to cut off European transit routes across the country if EU sanctions are imposed on Minsk. President Alexander Lukashenko said he will block European countries shipping goods to Russia and divert Belarus exports through ports in Lithuania. Lukashenko says the EU has disregarded Minsk's importance as a key trade linkage. Belarus is a major overland route for European goods bound for Russia and the main energy link between Russia and Europe. Earlier, the EU threatened sanctions against Belarus over Lukashenko's crackdown against protesters over rigging allegations. Meanwhile, British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has condemned the mass detention of over 50 journalists in Minsk. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. In the United States, thousands of people rallied in Washington, D.C. calling for racial justice and police reforms. This follows unrest over the police shooting of a black man, Jacob Blake, in Wisconsin. This report has more.
On a hot, humid day in the U.S. Capitol, attendees of the protest lined along Constitution Avenue early in the morning amid a heavy police presence. The march coincides with 57th anniversary of Martin Luther King's iconic speech, "I Have a Dream." The 1963 event was credited with spurring the passage of the Civil Rights Act, outlawing segregation. Yet today, families of the U.S.'s most known victims of police discrimination and brutality had to make an impassioned plea for justice.
I got it. I got it. We're gonna have court right now. Guilty! Yeah. Guilty! Guilty! Racism against all of us. Guilty! 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 Racism against Trayvon Martin. We find them guilty! Guilty! Racism against George Floyd.
The demonstration has been dubbed "Get Your Knee Off Our Necks" in reference to George Floyd, who was killed by police in May. Civil rights leader, the Reverend Al Sharpton, who led the crowd, said they are determined to bring about a change.
So we didn't just come today to have a show. Demonstration without legislation will not lead to change. We didn't come out and stand in this heat because we didn't have nothing to do. We come to let you know if we will come out by these numbers in the heat and stand in the heat, that we will stand in the polls all day long.
The UN Human Rights Office said the images of the shooting of Jacob Blake show that the police had used excessive force. The Black Lives Matter movement persists across the U.S., but people face the same violence which they have been protesting against. In Denver, police clashed with protesters and fired tear gas into crowds. The country has been seeing unrest in several cities since the custodial killing of Floyd, but police brutality continues.
Now in Russia, thousands of people took to the streets in the city of Khabarovsk to protest President Vladimir Putin's handling of a regional political crisis and the suspected poisoning of his critic Alexei Navalny. Protesters marched in support of Navalny, who fell gravely ill this month after drinking a cup of tea at an airport cafe. He was airlifted to Germany last week after collapsing during a flight to Moscow from the Siberian city of Tomsk. Residents of Khabarovsk started holding weekly rallies after the July 9 detention of the region's governor Sergei Frugal over murder charges. The supporters say the detention is politically motivated. Now, Russia says its nationals traveling overseas can face persecution from U.S. intelligence agencies. In a statement, Russia's foreign ministry said the nationals should be vigilant while traveling to the U.S. after the arrest of Russian citizens Yegor Krechkov. The statement said U.S. law enforcement agencies continue to arrest Russians around the world. It also said nationals who refuse to plead guilty are handed prison sentences. The ministry said Russian diplomats are doing everything to assist Russian nationals for ensuring their legitimate rights. As many as 56 such incidents have taken place since 2008, with 6 occurring in 2019. Earlier, the U.S. Department of Justice said Krechkov has been arrested in Los Angeles over a conspiracy to intentionally causing damage to a protected computer. Now in the U.S., the death toll from Hurricane Laura has risen to 14 across the southern states of Louisiana and Texas. Officials say around 8,000 homes were destroyed in the two states. In Louisiana, 5 died from carbon monoxide poisoning from gas electricity generators, 4 from trees falling, 1 died from drowned. In Texas, a man was killed when a tree hit his home, while 3 others succumbed to a possible carbon monoxide poisoning in Port Arthur. The hurricane has now been downgraded to a tropical storm, but heavy rain is still reported in several states. Meanwhile, the death toll from storms which hit earlier Haiti has risen from 10 to 31, while 8 people are still missing. Now in Afghanistan, the death toll from flash floods triggered by heavy rains this week has risen to 160. 13 provinces, mostly in the country's north, were affected by floods. Parvan is the worst hit province, accounting for 116 deaths and more than 120 injured. Rescuers continue to search for missing people amidst mud and rubble as floods wash away several homes across the country. NATO has also joined the Afghan military in rescue and relief operations. The Black Panther actor Chadwick Boseman has died at the age of 43 after a 4-year-long battle against colon cancer. The actor's publicist announced the death of the blockbuster Black Panther's King T'Challa on his social media accounts. His publicist said Boseman died at his home in Los Angeles with his wife and family by his side. Boseman's Black Panther is one of the highest-grossing films and was nominated for 6 Oscars. The movie won 3 Academy Awards In a statement following Boseman's death, Martin Luther King III said the actor brought history to life with his roles. The late actor originated the Black Panther role 2 years earlier in Marvel's Captain America and reprised the part twice in 2018 and 19's Avengers series. Boseman also played Black icons Jackie Robinson and James Brown. A Japanese firm has successfully tested its first flying car with a pilot on board. Tokyo-based company SkyDrive says the vehicle was airborne for around 4 minutes in central Japan. SkyDrive said it held the test flight of its SD-03 model earlier in August. It said the SD-03 is the world's smallest flying car, measuring 4 meters in length and width, with a height of 2 meters. SkyDrive said it hopes to start a flying car transfer service in 2023. China's autonomous region, Tibet, has been at the forefront of the country's efforts to promote green development. China has made remarkable advancement in the conservation of the ecosystem over the past 5 years. This report has more details.
China has stepped up protection of Tibet's natural resources such as grasslands, wetlands and forests. In Lhasa city, the area of water bodies in the Lalu Wetland National Nature Reserve has been expanded around 30%. This increased the number of migratory birds to over 15,000. The efforts resulted in the steady growth of Yunhua snub-nosed monkey, a severely endangered species. The steps to protect the ecosystem have greatly improved people's well-being.
We have felt continued improvement in the sanitation, ecology, and infrastructure in the Lalu Wetland Reserve whenever we come for a walk and fresh air. The environment is better and our sense of happiness is stronger.
The reserve is also home to other animals such as clouded leopard, snow leopard, and wild ox. On the whole, some 440 kinds of vascular plants and nearly 160 types of vertebrates have been found in the reserve. In the past 5 years, Lhasa has achieved a green transformation through afforestation and management of its water resources.
We've connected the Potala Palace and the Norbulinka Palace to World Cultural Heritage Sites through the expansion of our river system, which covers a combined 72.24 kilometers with the newly added 36-kilometer-long water bodies measuring 26 hectares in total.
In Tibet, a total of 538,800 square kilometers in 74 counties and districts have been designated for ecological conservation. It has also built 47 nature reserves of various types with a combined area of 412,200 square kilometers. The Chinese authorities have invested about $9 million to improve infrastructure in the reserve.
More news coming up after a break. Stay tuned. American tech giant Apple has terminated Fortnite creator Epic Games' accounts on its App Store amid a legal battle. Apple said its move will not affect Epic Games' Unreal Engine. iPhone users will not be able to download Fortnite or other Epic titles through its App Store. Earlier, a federal court ruled that Apple could block Epic's titles but not Unreal Engine while the antitrust lawsuit plays out. Apple pulled Epic after the popular games creator implemented a feature to let iPhone users make in-app purchases directly. Apple had said it would allow Fortnite back into the store if Epic removed the direct payment feature, but Epic refused, saying complying with the request would be plotting with them to maintain a monopoly over in-app payments. Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.